Welcome to another episode of From the Blind Spot, presented by me, Zach. Let me be the first to tell you that it's race week. That's right, the Australian Grand Prix is this weekend. I believe it's March 15th. For American watchers, it's going to be like Saturday night into Sunday morning. So Central Standard Time Zone, 11 p.m. start. If you're willing to stay up for that after your day of day drinking for St. Patrick's Day, be my guest because I'll be staying up. But yeah, that's the big news for this week. But obviously, this is a podcast that isn't going to be covering that. I'm going to be doing a race preview podcast later this week. Hopefully, coming out Thursday, Friday. But for this episode, we're going to review Drive to Survive Season 7. That's right. Drive to Survive Season 7. I covered a little bit, like a little preview last episode. I'm going to go over kind of a few questions that I stole from other podcasts about what I liked, what I didn't like, what I would like to see going forward, and kind of like the vibe that the producers of Netflix gave me. So, and then after that, we'll do a little bit of a preview for the next episode. That's a race preview episode for Australia. So stay tuned, busy week. So I'm going to go over, I think, 4 questions, but they're going to be, and some other bullet points, but they're going to have some pretty in-depth opinions, I would say. So my first question is, what were my top 3 episodes? My top 3 episodes were probably as follows. The Carlos Sainz episode, where it focused a lot about Williams, Flavio Biotelli. Sorry if I butchered that name. I'm probably going to continue butchering that name in this episode. But he was like this new character that they thrusted upon us, even though like he was in F1 before and he's in F1 again. He's kind of like the playboy. He's going to do what he wants. They kind of made him look like a little bit of a villain character, kind of like how they portrayed basically the entire Red Bull team this time. But that's a little bit off topic. The Carlos Sainz episode focused a lot about Williams and Alpine and like their bid to try and get Carlos to sign with that team for 2025. Overall, I thought this episode was done pretty well, just because like it kind of built off the fact that Lewis Hamilton was leaving for Ferrari, and that ousted Carlos. So Carlos was shopping around. In the beginning of the episode, it was like, yeah, or when other drivers were being asked about their contracts, they're like, yeah, I don't really know because I'm waiting on Carlos. Everyone was waiting on Carlos to sign, and then the rest of the dominoes would fall for where all the other drivers were going. But yeah, it was really good to see James Vowles, a lot of like the Williams team, a lot of like, hey, like Carlos, we really want you here at Williams. And like there was the whole spoiler alert, there was a whole like conference room, champagne on ice, and Carlos never showed for the signing. And I think like later it came out that Alpine had this new team principal, Flavio Biatelli, whatever his name is. Bad boy of F1 team principals. Worse than Christian Horner's, Red Bull's Christian Horner. But yeah, it was kind of a behind the scenes thing that we didn't really get to see, I think, ever before in Drive to Survive. So I like the fact that the producers thought about like a new way to portray like a signing, not just being like Will Buxton coming out here being like, oh, and this happened. No, it was kind of like a little bit of a build up, a little bit of suspense on the fact that Carlos didn't really know where he was going to go. And he ended up with Williams, as we know. So, and I feel like they did a good job portraying how Carlos felt. They talked to his manager, which actually happened to be his cousin with the same name. I thought that was kind of funky, but yeah. So that was the number 1 episode that I liked. The second episode was In the Heat of the Night, which this was a completely new kind of episode. in Drive to Survive where the drivers got to kind of film their like day to day for the build up of the Singapore Grand Prix, and they gave it to 5 different drivers. It was Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, and George Russell. So we kind of got to see a little bit of behind the scenes, like in their hotel rooms, like with the like cameras not in their face. So it was kind of nice to see them like in a relaxed form. I personally got to learn a lot about like the day in the life as an F1 driver because it's like when they go to Singapore and it's such a late race that a lot of them don't wake up until like 1 p.m. in the afternoon, and that's when they have their breakfast and like they have these little quirks or like they go to like a fan meetup like technically it's Alex's home race, which it was nice to see like his aspect of it for a home race because the the people there like love Alex. I honestly didn't really know that too much about that, but it was kind of cool to see because he's one of my favorite drivers and to see like kind of their pre-day routine or like their relaxation routine because like some of them get dinner late at night on like a Saturday after qualifying. Like it showed Pierre and Charles getting dinner. Uh, it showed Alex getting ready. It showed like he was given a rug of like I think a cat face of a rug, and then like some of his videos had that rug in it, which I thought was kind of cool and unique um, for the show. But yeah, more of the behind the scenes thing from Drive to Survive, which I like personally. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later on and what I'd like to see more. That's a question. But something I learned about Charles was that he can play the piano and that he like just always has to have a piano in his hotel room. It like must calm him down or something at the end of the night where he's just practicing his piano playing. But speaking of Charles Leclerc, let's talk about the Charles Leclerc episode. Le Curse of Leclerc. This is basically just like Charles talking about his win at Monaco, how much it meant to him, like people mentioning the curse because he's had so much bad luck there in the past. But to be honest, it was a really good, really well done episode. I heard some people say like, oh, like there was a YouTube video out there where he kind of went over some of this stuff, but I was like, I don't care. This is kind of cool to see behind the scenes. It's like his apartment in Monaco that they were at for a little bit, his mom cutting his hair, his entire family being there to watch him win this home race of his that like his father would have loved to have seen, who had unfortunately passed away before he became an F1 driver, but like it was such a powerful episode and kind of emotional to the point where like I was like, oh, this is a very touching uh, episode for F1 and kind of like a break from the suspense and the drama. It was more of just, well, obviously, yes, the episode was suspenseful if you didn't know the outcome, but Drive to Survive isn't really tailored to the normal F1 uh, connoisseur. That's a wrong word. Viewer. The normal F1 viewer who has like watched all these races and knows what's going to happen. It's more for like the casual that like doesn't follow the season and like doesn't know everything that happens. It's more for like those viewers, and that's how I got into F1 because I watched Drive to Survive. But yeah, more behind the scenes stuff were kind of the episodes that I kind of leaned towards. It wasn't really the team principal's doing this and he's giving this driver a test, or I don't know, whether it's just talking about drivers and then a little bit about the race. I feel like the behind the scenes thing and more about the drivers is kind of what I want to see from Drive to Survive in the future. But yeah, let me move on to my next question. What did they miss? They missed a lot. Obviously, the 2024 season had 24 races, and there's a lot of story points for them to go over. I think the biggest storyline that they miss is just like the Williams catastrophe that happened last year, where like in the second race of the season out of Australia, they had I think two crashes in qualifying, and only one of the cars was able to race after that. And the guy who crashed, Alex crashed, and his car was unusable for the race the next day, but they didn't have that extra chassis. So they put Alex in Logan's car, and Logan wasn't able to race. And people were up in arms, like, how can you do this to Logan? Logan wasn't good. Logan Sargent was bad, he crashed a lot. That's why they kicked him out halfway through the last season. But, anyways, Williams had 17 crashes last year with three drivers. And moving and like just having more of that James Vowles, like, this is why we're doing this, to make Williams strong again, make it a better team, try and get that better driver in there, and try and give Colapinto experience in case we need him later on, like if we need a new driver. And like the Colapinto storyline is you get this, it could have been like you get this Argentinian F2 driver that's been in your driver academy and no one really knows. You could have had Liam Lawson from Red Bull. You could have put Kimi Antonelli in the car. But James Vowles is like, no, we're going to do this the Williams way. We're going to use one of our, like, development team drivers and put him in there. And, like, I don't think many people had heard of him if you only follow F1. So I thought that that could have been, like, a good storyline for them to use. It would have been, like, I don't know, the kid from Argentina. I don't know what they would have called the episode. They're pretty creative with their episode titles. What else did they miss? Oliver Behrman. They threw him in kind of late in the episodes because one of the episodes was about Haas and Io Komatsu. So I feel like they could have talked about him at Saudi Arabia and another race that he got points for Haas at, not just his one bad race that he had at Brazil. So that was just my thought. Um, Oliver Behrman storyline could have been good. Another thing that they missed was that how George Russell was disqualified from Belgian Grand Prix, the Belgian Grand Prix. He was disqualified from that one because of his car being too light. They just didn't mention that in the episode. But for the storyline, it was kind of like George needed this good race for him to be cemented as the Mercedes number one driver. And he was. He won the race, but he got disqualified. But for the storyline, Netflix left it out. And I was like, yeah, it kind of makes sense. It makes George look like this really skilled driver who's ready to take over that number one role in the team. I feel like those were the big things that they missed from the 2024 season, but obviously there could be a few more things. But I feel like those are the big storylines and big points that were pretty important that they missed. Obviously, they have to limit things to 10 episodes, so you have to make some cuts, right? My next question is, what would I like to see next year? Something that I feel like Drive to Survive can do more of next year is giving like the drivers the phones again. I feel like if you give there's four rookies this year. I feel like if you can give those rookies phones, maybe one race out of the year, and just for them to be like showing them like how they did with in the heat of the night for Singapore, but you do it for like I don't know, probably later in the season, maybe like Silverstone, probably not Silverstone because that's a big one, but like what's a probably a good one to give the rookies, maybe like Austin, because like I feel like that could be a pretty good one if you did Austin storyline with like the rookies that are like, yeah, when I first started this season, I was like, oh, I don't know, this is gonna be kind of tough. And then like they get kind of comfortable and they're like, oh yeah, this is what I learned. I felt pretty dumb the first time doing this. But I feel like going forward, I want more of the behind the scenes thing. And like obviously you're getting new rookies, so it's gonna be a way to introduce new drivers. Like obviously some of those drivers were introduced in 2020 in this past Drive to Survive season 7, but give them more of a spotlight in season 8. That's and you can just do like a whole thing about rookies and like their backstory and stuff like that. But Netflix, great job giving them phones. Give them phones again. Give them to the rookies. Give them to maybe George can get another episode if he has a good year. But yeah, I like that idea. So continue it. Another thing that I would like to see in the future for next season is obviously I would love to see James Vowles a little bit more. James Vowles' big throbbing brain. That's a call out to their car release. But I would love to see more of James Vowles because his like demeanor is very ro this is going to sound like an insult, but it's very robotic. He's very calculated in how he speaks, very smooth speaking as well. Not like he's going to like deceive you or something, but he's more of just like calm tone, even keel, speaking long sentences with good pauses. That's just, I don't know. I would like to see him more. That's maybe a little bit biased on my part because I'm a Williams fan, but I feel like it could be something interesting. Like if you gave him a phone, because I know he's not the best with phones, but if you gave him a phone and he had to take selfies or take videos of his day at like the factory or at a race, I think that could be pretty funny. Another thing that I would like to see is I know that Danica Patrick was not in this season. I saw that mentioned maybe once. I know Will Buxton's not going to be around much next season because he's doing IndyCar in North America for the 2025 season. So I would like to see Gunter Steiner be one of like the break screen experts, like F1 experts that they pull in every once in a while. I would like to see him because he was a team principal for 8 years from 2016 to 2023, 2024. So I would like to see him be like that person being like, oh yeah, I wouldn't do this. F that. Screw that, man. I don't know. I can't do a good Gunter Steiner impression, but get him back and Drive to Survive. Do it for the people. That I mean, it could be pushing the getting him back in. It could be pushing it a little, but I think that he's a pretty good character in F1 and everyone knows him, and he's still pretty relevant because he's on other podcasts. So that's just what I would like to see next year. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more to come because this year is yet to happen. The last question that I have written down here is my thoughts of season 7. It was better than last year. That's what I want to get out and say. Obviously, last year you had Max winning most of the races, so you had to kind of focus on other things off the track. I'm glad they got back to more on-track action. It was pretty good. Not the best, but like I said, better than last year. So it's a pretty good season because I feel like they had a mix of trying to get every team in there. I feel like they focused a little bit too much on Alpine and Red Bull. Somehow they always fit in an Alpine like episode. And obviously like they didn't touch on the fact that Alpine had a lot of turnover, a lot of change, engine issues and stuff like that, but they really turned around the back end of the season, which is a point that they hammered on. And obviously like Red Bull was the original team that they did for season 1. And like obviously there's a lot of Red Bull. Christian Horner's like one of the main characters, and we just always had a video of Christian Horner like calling his wife, or like just a video of him talking to the Netflix cameras. I feel like one other thought that I had was like too much team principle. I feel like was like there was too much of them, and I would prefer to have more driver conversations. I know maybe some of the drivers don't like it because there was no Fernando Alonso, there was no Lance Stroll, there was no or very little Lewis Hamilton, and absolutely no Max Verstappen. Like he's not into this at all. He's kind of come out and said that he hates the Drive to Survive Netflix documentary, and he made that apparent when I think Lando was taking a video of Max on the phone, and Max just said like, "Oh, f that," which it's like they do that a lot. They kind of break the fourth wall a lot with the Drive to Survive crew, and that's kind of a fun clip for them to throw in, showing that the drivers have personality and they're just fun guys that are race car drivers too. But yeah, those are my four questions for this. Overall, I think that the Drive to Survive was okay. There were some episodes that weren't my favorite. Here, let me try and find the list of episodes again. I did not like Business as Usual. The kickoff episode wasn't really my favorite. I feel like the best part of that was kind of seeing the behind the scenes of Carlos, like kind of whispering, like a kind of cool thing to see, because like that's obviously a question that didn't get broadcasted like during those interviews. Business as Usual is not my favorite. Looking Out for Number One. So that was like it was okay. It was mainly a lot of racing and like Carlos and Lewis or Carlos looking out for himself. I feel like Carlos got a lot of the spotlight this season. Um Elbows Out wasn't really a good one. It was kind of like Danny Ricks getting replaced by Liam Lawson. Liam Lawson's moving to Red Bull. I just didn't feel like that was my favorite episode because it focused a lot on Liam and kind of made Liam look like a villain, which his attitude towards Sergio Perez in the Mexican Grand Prix wasn't great. And I just feel like Liam shouldn't be made out to be a villain just because he's on Red Bull. Like how Christian Horner has been made out to be a villain and he's been booed at the O2. So yeah, those were probably my low end of the season. But yeah, okay. That was my F1 or Drive to Survive review, I guess. Yeah, Drive to Survive review of season 7. I am now going to talk about the preview episode coming out. My preview episode will consist of just explaining what's going to happen for the Australian Grand Prix that happens in Melbourne, Australia. I'm going to give my P1 to P3 predictions and P10. I will be giving betting like my bets that I would do if I could bet. Um, what else? Kind of like what's changed about the track layout. There's been a few changes with the track layout and DRS zones. Um, the weather, the outlook, kind of what I think will happen, who's going to take pole position, stuff like that. So, yeah. Um, so look out for an episode dropping later this week. Thank you all for listening. Shout out John. And Zach is signing out. Thank you for listening.